Hey guys, I thought I would make a couple of videos about some of the photography jobs I've done and personal projects I've been working on over the past few years. As some of you know, we've been traveling quite a lot. A lot of my photography friends are back in South Africa and I kind of miss having someone to speak about my photography with. So maybe this is a cool way to share what I'm doing and to sort of engage in a bit of conversation about photography and things like that. So the first one I want to talk about is the recent trip we went to in Nepal. There was an afternoon that I told Megan that I just want to go around and take some photos on the street, but this time I wanted to do something a little differently to what I would usually do, and that is to only focus on slow shutter speed photography. Gear that I took with for this trip was the Fujifilm X Pro 2, a 12mm lens and an ND filter. So with this ND filter, it's a variable, so when you twist it, it gets lighter and darker. And this was important because I would be sort of in and out of shadows and the sunlight and wanting to keep my shutter speed at a very slow speed. Nepal is a very interesting country. When you come to Kathmandu, it's just crazy. There's cars and traffic everywhere and cows lying in the road and dust, and from a photography point of view, it's absolutely amazing. You can just walk around and everywhere you look, there's just something to see. We stayed in this area called Tamal, which is definitely a tourist area. But if you walk through there and you start going a little bit further out, you start to get to more local places. So I just want to show you some of the shots that I took that I really liked and kind of like what I was thinking while I was taking them and why I was choosing what settings. So when you're shooting with slow shutter speed, you basically have about two options of what kind of photos you want to get. The one is you're going to keep the camera still and whatever is moving is going to be out of focus or is going to have motion blur. And the other one is if you pan with the object that's moving, then you will find that they will be clear and the rest of the background will have motion blur. So this one is an example of the first one where you're keeping the camera still and anything that's moving is out of focus. So if you look here at the back, you can see the motorbikes driving past. Because this camera that I was using, it doesn't have any IS in the lens or in the body, it's a little bit hard to take these kind of shots, because if you look closely you'll see I was still getting a little bit of motion blur because I was shooting here at like 1/15th of a second. In this photo is an example of me panning with the subject. So this motorbike was sort of coming through this gap. I tried to follow the guy on the motorbike with the camera. The other thing that's a tip is to use like burst mode on these kind of photos, because if you're just taking a single shot, the chance of you getting it right is really low. So if you use the camera in burst mode, it really does help your chances. I also like this picture because this is really how it feels to be walking through these streets. There's cars everywhere, there's motorbikes coming through different places. Sometimes you have to be off the sidewalk and it feels pretty much what this photograph looks like. Yeah, so here's another shot. You can see because this guy on the right hand side here, because he wasn't moving at this point, he's pretty clear, but all the people that are moving will have like motion blur. I think this is a cool picture showing a bit of contrast of something that is not moving and all the chaos around it. So what's interesting when you're shooting with an ND filter is you also are able to shoot at a really wide aperture. So yeah, I was able to get the motion blur of the motorbike as well as getting a depth of field blur by focusing on something very close like this mirror. So this is a mirror of the motorbike, and you can see that the writing here where it says Red Bull is kind of out of focus because of the narrow depth of field, but it's also got a slow shutter speed. Normally you won't be able to get this kind of shot without using an ND filter because you'll be using an aperture of like f8 or something like that. Here I was trying a vertical composition, and I quite like this photo because of the sun flare coming in and the guy's look, how he was looking into the camera. So in this shot, I saw this man that was walking around like selling different things, and I tried to get this framing exactly in the middle of these three buildings. And then basically the idea was to wait to find some kind of vehicle that would drive past. And I think this one's cool because it really shows the kind of vehicles that are in Nepal, and it tells a lot of the story. There's a lot of these Indian bikes called the Royal Enfield. They are really nice bikes to ride. I've actually ridden one a few times. And these guys are going pretty fast through this traffic, and there's people all over, and there's definitely a lot of close calls. If you look carefully, you can see I got this nice and sharp, especially this front part. So here are the shots. I was shooting at about f/22, and if you look at the sky here, you can see all these little spots. If you are shooting with a really fast aperture like f/22 or f/16, it will highlight these spots on your sensor. This is basically like dust on my sensor that I should really clean, and I have actually since. It's pretty easy to clean it off the photo. You can just use the spot removal tool to clean it. You only notice these spots if you have a sky in or a very clean background. So on most of the other shots, I won't even notice it. So here there was this guy that was just like sitting and chilling, and I sort of hung around and tried to get a few different compositions, but this is the one that I liked. Him like right in the middle, and again I was just waiting for some cars to come past or some kind of movement in front to make use of the slow shutter speed. So after I took that picture of a guy, I was kind of trying to find something similar of a person that was just like sitting there, and then to combine it with some kind of movement of something around him. Yeah, so this is a cool photo I quite like that sort of tells a bit of a story of the area. You got these really tall buildings and cause these very narrow streets, and just the amount of people and the movement is pretty crazy. There were these three men that were sitting in these little shops, and they're selling spices and things like that. I thought this was quite an interesting composition with the three little windows. You can see here, because of the slow shutter speed, there was some of the writing that has a bit of blur on it, but in general, it looks like I pretty much got it right. Yeah, so then I started doing something a little bit different. After I took this last photo, I was mostly shooting at 1/15th of a second. So here I started to slow down the shutter speed even more just to try, and I was at a half a second. I started to really enjoy what kind of photos I was getting. I don't know if it was because of the sun that was making the colors so vibrant, because if you had to do this kind of shot without an ND filter, you would normally have to do it at night to get a half a second. I don't think you would be able to even use f/22. You wouldn't be able to use a half a second. It would just be overexposed. But because of the ND filter, you can actually do this during the day. And I really liked how these pictures came out. To me, they almost more like a painting, and it's about the colors and these shapes. And again, to me, it gives me a real feeling of how it was to walk down these really busy streets. So here is one of my favorite photos that I took on that day, and it's again with half a second. I love the center composition on this, and there's the contrast between that really bright red and then the dark shadows on the side. You can even see there's like some of the shadow caused by the sun, and yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite pictures. And after that, I got a few more interesting pictures that I really liked with this very slow shutter speed. These are also mostly like panning. I would wait for someone to come past and then do a very quick pan with them. And because they were in the sun, it also almost acted like a flash, where I got a more clearer part of them that was not moving. In this last photo, it's also an example of something that looks a bit more like a painting, and I love the color contrast with the blue and these reds. And also, if you look very carefully, you can see sort of a bit of like a ghostly image of somebody. Cool, I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you thought of this kind of video. It's kind of new for me to be speaking into the camera like this still. I'm not 100% comfortable doing it, but I suppose you carry on doing it, you maybe get used to it. But yeah, I guess on like social media these days, things just get lost in it, and I seem to miss the engagement with somebody. I know that I'm talking into a camera now, but hopefully these videos will sort of build a little bit more of a connection with people, that we can have a discussion about photography, and I look forward to seeing where this goes.